Hello, my name is Father Darrell. I'm really encouraged that this amount of people have gathered to learn more about these encyclicals and their very powerful impact on our church and in the world on a Wednesday afternoon, especially at this time. Usually this is nap time for many people after their lunch. And I'm glad that people are sacrificing that to be with us this afternoon. I'm very anticipating very much about learning a lot today from these two encyclical letters. And I'd like for us to begin with a small prayer. I'm using a prayer which is very common among indigenous peoples in North America. My mother was a native woman from Manitoulin Island, indigenous woman from Manitoulin Island. We pray in circles using the 4 directions. And even today, you'll notice this when the Native people gather together, there'll be a prayer in the 4 directions. The purpose is to make holy the area where we're gathering. So we're gathering in cyberspace, and the space among us in this cyber location, we're blessing it and asking God's Spirit to make it holy. So let's begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Spirit of light, come to us out of the eastern direction, which is the place of new beginnings and promise. With the power of the rising sun, announcing a new day, you give us hope. Let there be joy in our words, just as you gave us the spiritual gift of new life that comes to us through the waters of baptism. Now let us think of the South. Great Spirit, send us the warmth and soothing winds of your healing medicines from the South. You are the gentle rain that brings forth the seed of life. Enable us to hear prophetic voices around us. And just as St. Catherine Tekakwitha shared God's love, and all the saints who shared God's love, compassion, and healing power among her people. Spirit of life, we now face you in the direction of the West. Help us to be bearers of your word, your holy word. May we be voices of life and hope to all peoples, nations, races, and beliefs, as exemplified in the life of our saints and in the life of Saint Catherine Tekakwitha. Finally, from the direction in the north, Great Spirit, come to us with the power of the north. Make us courageous to walk a sacred vision with all your saints and with Saint Catherine Tekakwitha. Give us strength and endurance to do all that we are called to do during our life, especially in times of trials and adversity. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. This is a prayer that was written and composed for the Tekakwitha Conference in the United States. So that's where this particular form of the prayer comes from. Thank you. Let's have a great meeting.
Thank you very much. I'm going to briefly introduce Father Augusto. I know that he's from Argentina. He was born in Argentina in 1969, and after studying law and working for 4 years in law, he entered the priesthood. He was ordained in 2004 and pursued further studies both in El Salvador and in England. He earned master's and doctoral degrees in moral theology with a focus on economics and environmental ethics. Father Augusto has lectured on theology, Christian ethics, and human rights since 2004, and he contributes to mainstream and Catholic media on matters pertaining to Pope Francis, Catholic social teaching, and social Catholicism more generally. Father Augusto has worked for the Vatican's Dicastery for promoting integral human development since it was formed in 2017. Pope Francis appointed him to be one of the expert advisors for the Synod on the Amazon, which took place last year in October 2019. And he named Augusto to be Adjunct Secretary of his Dicastery this past April. So welcome. Thank you very, very much, Father Augusto, for agreeing to speak with us today. And please unmute yourself. And I think you should be able to share your screen. I hit those control buttons as well. And over to you. Very much looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
If you turn it, yes, there we go. Now it's even larger. Good.
So thank you for the invitation. And so I had, this is the almost, it's past 8 in the evening here in Rome. We started with, it was a very early, I mean, a very late, a very long day, and but meeting with all these people, different people, and Vatican officers and UN. So I'm delighted to end the day with normal people. So thank you very much, with parishioners, with a parish priest. So thank you for that. And I will offer. I mean, there are so many things to say and so many ways to present Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, but I would like to introduce it in the framework of Pope Francis' consistent magisterium, because it's a proposal. These are not just documents, you see, that we are invited to read, that we are actually. So if you don't want to believe me a thing, please, but do read the documents. But these are not just documents to read, because sometimes they're long, no? Then people, they don't have the time. But basically it's an invitation for a different lifestyle, for a different world, and a different world that we can be part of, that we can prepare that different world, that future. So I hope that at the end of my presentation, you will be a bit excited about this proposal of Pope Francis, not just as the document, but as this consistent and very strong and radical proposition of being a church in a world that is in crisis. Is that okay? More or less, this will be my approach. So here we go. So as you might know, and if you don't know, I'm delighted to tell you. So let me wait 1 second. There is a trilogy that inspired the Pope Francis. Pope Francis is the first, not only the first Latin American Pope, but he's the first Pope in taking the name of Francis. No? That's why it's not called Francis the First, because Francis, just Francis, Pope Francis. If there's another one, it will be called Pope Francis the Second, but just Pope Francis. And he clarified, because there are many Saint Francis, so he clarified that he has taken this name from Saint Francis of Assisi. So, there's in these years, 7 years of his pontificate, there's a trilogy of messages that are synthesized in three documents, inspired, the 3 documents, by Saint Francis of Assisi. And each one is related to, they're all interconnected, but one is related to the church, how to be church, no? And you have here, no, in the left of your screen, Pope Francis's hands with others. The other is how to look after our common home, our planet, how to live in this planet that is crying out, and how do we acknowledge that we are part of creation and we are responsible for God's creation. No? And the third one is, but we are also a community. We're not just a community of Christians in the church or creatures, but we are a community of human beings. So and we are, it's not that so how can we live as a human family in a global world that is as interconnected as ever? So can you see the three things? And now I will show you the three things, however, are in trouble, because the church, well, you can say with all the sex abuse scandals, financial scandals, with lack of vocations, the church is still alive. But, no? And remember that when Pope Francis was elected, the majority of the cardinals, then one of the reasons they elected Pope Francis was, well, we need to find somebody who is not of the Roman Curia, outside, who is from a country where the church is alive, but still in problems, no? Who is a pastor, because we want to rediscover this flavor of being a church, a pastoral church. Also, when Pope Francis was elected, the ecological crisis was increasing and increasing and increasing. We have been living that for some decades, but to a point that we are at that moment, and now it's even worse, but at that moment we were reaching some tipping points of no return in some ecological damages to some forests like the Amazon, or to the Arctic or the Antarctic that you can see shrinking. No? And also a world in trouble, because although we don't have world wars, we have the problem of migration, we have the problem of conflicts all over the world, we have the problem of nuclear weapons, we have the problem of an unfair globalization that has forged or foment increasing inequality. So it's very nice to say, Pope Francis, the church, how to live with creation, how to care for each other, but the three are in trouble. But the good news for all of us, and now for you especially, is that you can see the consistency of these papers. The trilogy inspired by St. Francis, the first one, how to recover, how to boost that being the church led by the Holy Spirit, a renewed church, a church that reaches out and is not trapped in the sacristy, a church that is like a hospital filled. This was before the pandemic, no? A church that is closer to the poor, to those in need, a church that is not shy in promoting different models of development because the current ones are unfair, unsustainable. A church that is not shy in expressing social love or political love, because we are political people. So all this, a church that is in the world and for the world, who suffers with the world, who works for the world, as a community of Christians and baptized, of course, but it's not isolated from the world. That is the idea of the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council in the 60s, that you might remember better than me. But this idea, how can we express it now? And look at this. When Francis of Assisi heard his vocation, he heard Jesus saying, "Ve e repara la mia chiesa," go and repair my church. No? And he thought, Francis of Assisi thought that God was calling him to repair a church, the building of a church. Not that was in ruins at that time. I don't know if you have been to Assisi, but then he later discovered that God was calling this young man to repair the church as a community, not just the building of that particular church in Assisi, but the church as a community. That church was becoming a belligerent church, going to crusades to impose the faith, a church that was becoming very rich and was fixed on power and money. And this young man received this call to repair the church, not just the building, but the entire thing. Imagine if you received that call. But he created a community, no? He created a different way of, a refreshed way of being church. And he has and he did his job and rejuvenated the church at that time, and still is doing it now. I think that Pope Francis, so Francis of Assisi and Francis of Rome, the Bishop of Rome, no? As he introduced himself when he first appeared in the balcony when he was elected. No? The Bishop of Rome, emulating or echoing Francis of Assisi, his first important document is an apostolic exhortation to the whole church that is called Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. And this is the way of repairing the church. And in that document, he said, I want the church for the next years to go this way, not that way. I want the church to reach out, to make an option for the poor, to be in the world, for the world, seeking for a new model of development, strengthening our communities, strengthening our capacity to dialogue with others. I want the priest to prepare the homilies. There's an entire chapter. So you have the right to, if Father Darilon doesn't prepare, you say, but Francis says that you have to prepare it. I'm just joking. I'm sure he does it very well. But I want the church to see all the things that we will love about the church. But it's a programmatic document. When he set out the lines of the church that he envisions based on the Vatican Council, but inspired by Francis of Assisi. A church for the poor, no? A poor church for the poor, and all that. All those phrases that you normally listen in the media or us priests repeating, most of them are coming from Evangelii Gaudium. Most of them. But then, do you remember the other thing? But the word is crying out, and we were reaching an unprecedented ecological crisis. And I'm emphasizing unprecedented is but never ever before in the history of humankind we have been in this situation. Never. So nobody knows exactly how to respond to this. No, because we need new ideas. Nobody has a unique idea. We need everybody. We are all parts of the problem. We should all be parts of the solution. And we need new contributions. And the church has been saying some things, previous popes, a lot of bishops' conference, but the Pope says, okay, we have to say something. And again, he took the inspiration from St. Francis of Assisi, who was the saint who was praising all creatures. This is a hymn, a song. I'm sure you sing it in your parish, no? Laudato Si, o mi Signore, no? Laudato Si, o mi Signore. So this was a hymn of Francis of Assisi, and are the first lines of the first social encyclical of Pope Francis, and the second strong document of his papacy, that is called Laudato Si, on the care for our common home. Look at that, it doesn't say the title Laudato Si Signore, because the encyclical is written for Christians, other religious people, and people of goodwill, and everybody in the planet, because this is for all people who inhabit the planet, our common home. So Laudato Si, you have to pray something, your God, nature, or something, as something outside yourself. Laudato Si on the care. It doesn't say on stewardship. It doesn't say, it could be a difficult word for people. Everybody understands what caring means. Am I right? You understand. What does it mean to care for your children, to your grandchildren? What does it mean to care for your students? What does it mean to care for your parishioners? To care for your house, to care for your dog, to care for your garden, to care for whatever you like. You understand what does it mean caring, and you don't understand when you are not caring. So this is the brilliancy. Care, everybody can understand the care, and common home. Just like the planet. The planet is okay, but it's a home. It's the only home that we have, I'm afraid. And in the home, economics, is destroying our common home. So we have to change it, and change it radically. No? So Laudato Si, praise be to you, my Lord, on the care for our common home. So how to live as people, as important creatures, created in the image and likeness of God, but created to care for God's creation. And we are not at the center of creation. The center of creation is always God. This anthropocentrism, that we are the center. We are here to very important creatures, the most important ones, but representing God, to care for what he has created, not to destroy it. And amazingly, the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, they go together. We'll go back to it. So how can we respond to these cries? And the third one, do you remember the first problem was the church? Look at this. We go and repair my church together. Well, how do we live in a creation that we are destroying? A new way of understanding our being in the creation, a new way of being church, a new way of understanding our being or living as creatures in the planet. But we can neither repair the church nor care for our common home if we keep fighting against each other. Am I right? You can see that at home, in the parish. So, and Fratelli Tutti. This is another expression of Francis of Assisi. All brothers and sisters. And he created a way of living as brothers and sisters, not as a hierarchy important. No, he created the Franciscans. So inspired by Francis of Assisi, Fratelli Tutti, brothers and sisters all on social friendship, on universal fraternity, universal solidarity. How can we have a new, given that we live in a global world, how can we have a new way of living together, a new way of promoting peace, a new politics, a new understanding of our social dimension, a new understanding of dialoguing with other religions, so that we can care for all our brothers and sisters, not just for the ones who are next to us. So can you see the wonderful, I don't know if I can share enough because we are in a webinar, not present, but the wonderful messages. For this is such good news. The joy of the gospel, if we are Christians and we cannot rejoice of the gospel and being a community that are followers of Jesus Christ, then do you remember Mahatma Gandhi? Do you remember what he started to go to visit some Catholic parishes? And he went out at the end, and the people asked, what do you think, Mahatma Gandhi, about? I think this is fabulous. This religion is fabulous. These Catholics are. But the only thing, I'm not convinced. And they asked me, why are you not convinced? Well, because when I go there to visit their churches and their masses, I am really moved and touched. I'm super happy. But when I go out, I can see the faces of these people, all very sad. So God cannot be there. So if we cannot rejoice of the gospel, even in the midst of problems, then we have a problem. And if we cannot rejoice and refresh the way of being church, not as the hierarchy and bureaucracy is important, but a way of being a community that serves and that can promote important changes, especially taking into account the last ones. If we can be a new, Laudato Si missionary, if we can contemplate and being moved by contemplation, or being moved by the destruction of contemplation, and therefore act and care for that, changing what we have to change, lifestyles, structures, wow. And if we can love all our brothers and sisters, especially those who are not loved, especially those who are discarded, especially those who are don't have even a voice, what a different world would be. It would be fantastic. You can see the trilogy. I would say that Evangelii Gaudium is the inspiration, and the two social encyclicals go hand in hand. So congratulations, because Laudato Si for me is one of the most important documents in my own life. But Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti are two pillars. You cannot understand one without the other, because you cannot care for our common home without caring for loving all brothers and sisters, and vice versa. You cannot love all brothers and sisters if you cannot care for our common home. They're the two pillars. But the ecclesiological inspiration is Evangelii Gaudium. So I am getting excited already with this trilogy, but I will go and tell you something again, even more excited, that is about the consistency of the methodology of the two pillars. Let's move now to Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. As I said before, the two inspired by Saint Francis, and the original sentence, the openness, is a quote from Saint Francis. who is the saint of fraternal openness, of love, of simplicity, of joy and peace, who walked alongside the poor and loved all creation. And this is a saint all saints are important, but this is a saint very relevant to us today, because today we need that spirit as a church, not just as individuals, and even as a world. But the two documents, Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, refer to many bishops' conference and other documents. Normally, previous encyclicals they were quoting, my predecessor on all popes, very important. But Fratelli Tutti and Laudato Si, they quote a lot of bishops. Imagine if you're a bishop and you feel, I mean, at the end of the word, and you feel that you're not important in the church, a community, the bishop in the Philippines, no? And suddenly you're quoted there a pope is quoting you, a bishop in Bolivia, in Peru, a bishop in the Patagonia, in the Amazon, in Canada, and suddenly you're quoted by the Pope. You see, this is the synodal church. The Bishop of Rome is the Pope, but he rules the church with the other bishops. And the Roman Curia helps the Pope, but it's just to help the Pope. You see, is Peter, the descendant of Peter, the Pope, and the descendant of the other apostles, the other bishops, in synodality, ruling the church with the help of others, like me. You see? So this is fantastic as well. And this is why they have all these synods supporting these three pillars: the synod of the family, the synod of the youth, the synod of the Amazon, no? But in support of all these things. But then the two pillars, they used a methodology that is coming from the Catholic social tradition or the Catholic social teaching. Some of you are familiar, but I briefly explain. It's called the see, judge, act. Or you can say see and listen, judge and discern, and act, or lines of actions. And a plus. The plus is and celebrate. The plus comes from Latin America because it's a circular thing. You see, you judge in the light of the gospel, you see the reality with others, with science, you judge it in the light of the gospel and the tradition of the church, and you propose lines of actions, concrete, responding to the promise that you're seeing. But then you celebrate something, because you have to celebrate something. And then you with the inspiration of your celebration, you see again, you judge. So the celebration is very important. And then the contribution, and Pope Francis, in this sense, I have to say, some people are like a bit Pope fanatics. Now, I work for the Pope, I'm super loyal to him, don't get me wrong. But we don't need to say things that even the Pope is not saying. He says in these two documents, he introduces these two documents very humbly, although they're superb, but the introduction, he introduces the documents very humbly, saying, this is just a contribution. I don't pretend, says the Pope, to solve all the problems of ecological crisis or the global politics. But it's a contribution to the ongoing reflection. So he acknowledges the tradition, to an ongoing reflection of the church and the world. And the aim is to provide a vision for action, no? An inspiration for transformation, a motivation to promote the change that we need. So on what? On the way we are treating the planet, integral ecology, on the way we are treating each other, universal fraternity. You can see. So if you ask me in one word, the way we treat creation, the way we treat one another. But this is a contribution to improve substantially, radically this, by addressing the problems, the most urgent problems that we have, not just by talking. And he's unashamedly Christian. He's not shy, but because he presents the best of the Christian tradition in dialogue with science, in dialogue with bishops, in dialogue with movements, in dialogue with other churches. He quotes science people from other faiths. So because he's proposing a church in dialogue, he could be unashamedly Christian. And this is a good for us, for parishioners. I mean, because when we take the best of our tradition, we can be like Jesus. Jesus was proposing this for everybody. The parables are for everyone, not just for us. Are universal. Everybody can understand. So it's a proposal for all. And I'm getting also excited, you see, while I'm presenting this. It's absolutely fabulous. The two documents, therefore, they respond to the current crisis. It's not just the Pope one day waking up and say, what can I do today? No. These are the two main problems of the world. So the Laudato Si, the common home is crying out, alongside the poor. This is what we are saying. So much so, I don't know if you remember, Laudato Si was written in 2015. The same year that more than 190 nations, at the end of the year, agreed, signed one of the most important, relevant, and it will be, we will remember forever that the family of nations has ever achieved. That is the Parish Agreement on the Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, where all nations said, this is the goals for the next decades, because otherwise we will destroy the planet. And Laudato Si was written before for some reason, you see. But the reality of Fratelli Tutti now is we live in a dark and closed world. Laudato Si, the light of the gospel, the theology of creation and redemption that goes hand in hand, Christ that has come to redeem the entire creation, including us, of course, but the entire creation, not just human beings. And the proposal, a positive proposal on integral ecology. What does it mean, integral ecology, to connect the social and the environmental issues, culture and nature, social systems and ecosystems that are connected, but we have disconnected them. But this is a positive proposal. In Fratelli Tutti, he does the same, but with the entire chapter on the Good Samaritan, judging the dark and closed world with the chapter of the Good Samaritan. But in a social dimension, I highly recommend that chapter. That is a very good chapter to read in a parish, for example. And the positive proposal is envisioning and engendering an open world, a world without borders. You will see, I think, echoing, you see, doctors without borders, but I said, well, everything without borders, because actually if we are in the globalization era, we need to think, well, borders will still exist, of course, but what does it mean? How can we help that? And the lines of action in Laudato Si are very clear, are a new dialogue, a new participation of those excluded in the new socio-economic system that we need to care for our common home. We need a new economic model of development. It's crystal clear on that. The second, but for that we need an ecological education, not just education, schooling or universities, everything. A way of understanding, educating, trying to extract the best out of us, critical thinking with an ecological mindset and spirituality. Because otherwise we become activists. How do people change? People do not change because somebody tells me to do it. It's not rational, that radical change. No? You can ask me, Augusto, can you change the slide? Can you put it? Yeah. But if you ask me, can you come and live in Canada? Well, I have to think about it. And even if you ask me, well, can you, can you go and change your entire vocation? Well, I need to. So if the more radical and important the change, the more it has to be from the heart, not just from the mind. And this is, anthropologists have studied that one of the most influential ways of change, of behavioral change, is or are religious celebrations, because it gets out of you. You share, you are more open to listen to things. You normally celebrate something from the past, looking for the future. So you have a different understanding of time. So spirituality, contemplation, also contemplate. Spirituality is very important, this integral ecological spirituality, and applying that in our lives. That is the main driver that we need and that what can contribute. So the good news for all of you is, well, how can I contribute to change the world, to stop the ecological destruction? This is UN stuff. No, no, no. You, ordinary parishioners, can provide the change. If we do this in every single parish, then we are halfway of having a different world. But the Pope is, again, humble and invites all the traditions, all the faith traditions, because we are all interconnected, to do the same. And I tell you what, we have never been so busy in the Vatican, because everybody calls us, now everybody wants the faith, and because of Pope Francis, everybody wants us. So this is happening. And then in Fratelli Tutti, the lines for actions are a universal horizon with local flavor, so globalization and localization, a better politics, because the one we have, let's be honest, is not working, a social dialogue for a new culture, new way of peace building, not just absence of war, beginning with the last, conflicts, the forgiveness, the memory and forgiveness to promote something new, no to war, no to death penalty, no to war, particularly in the era of nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. We cannot justify any war today, killing with drones. I mean, we too sophisticated weapons we have. So we need to find a way of developing peace in the 21st century. And the role of religions. So he's adding one. How our identity can contribute to create a new fraternity and a new model of development also. How am I doing with time? How much time do I have?
Let me see. If you could wrap up in about 5 minutes, that would be good, because I want to leave time for some questions.
Excellent. So I will show you these slides very quick, because they're backing up what I have already said. No, what he sees and listens on Laudato Si is the environmental deterioration that goes hand in hand with the social deterioration. No, and we have to respond together. A true ecological approach always becomes a social approach, no? And must include the question of justice in the debate of the environment. This is about justice. It's not just about keeping the trees or the whales, yes, but it's about justice. And it's not just about sustaining the environment, because life and nature is not just a sustaining. Life is life, nature is life-giving. So it's not just about not destroying or sustaining. It's about how can we find a system that is life-giving, like nature. You see, this is what he sees in Fratelli Tutti. He's seeing that a unified world is divided, and society has become more globalized, but not necessarily more. We are neighbors. We are brothers and sisters. Individualism is the worst virus that we have at present. Individualism, and you can see it even in the north part of the Americas, and here in Europe as well, but in everywhere. So because today the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading. At the beginning, you remember the 80s and 90s, it was a bit, okay, and now it's fading. How can we ignite it? And there, the two the two lights of the scriptures, of the creation and redemption text in Laudato Si, God saw that everything is good, and we have to care for that. And the parable of the Good Samaritan, that the Good Samaritan goes out of himself with caring for a person he shouldn't in his culture, because he was an enemy in principle. And he cares and finds a way of finding others to care for. So it's a social caring. It's not just an individual. What does the Pope discern in the light of the tradition, this integral ecology that I mentioned, that is inseparable from the notion of the common good, no? And unifying principle of social ethics. The common good is the sum of those conditions for social life which allow social groups and their individual members relatively thorough and ready access to their own fulfillment. This is, you see, and that requires a serene harmony with the environment. It's very, very important from our spirituality. And in Fratelli Tutti, the discerning is an open and fraternal world. And how can we, so life is the art of the encounter. It's an art of encounter. It's not easy to encounter, no? And to transcend our differences, our divisions. It's hard to do it in our parish, imagine nations, no? But kindness can free from that division, among other things. So here is the lines for action. You can see these two pictures captures, and I don't have to explain that because the pictures they took for their own. Laudato Si, socioeconomic, education, spirituality, a new prophetic development model. Prophetic, new, radically new. And Fratelli Tutti, universal love in politics. Love in politics, yes. Politics is one of the highest expression of love because we are political beings, political animals. Loving cultures, loving religions, a new prophetic political model, a new prophetic development model, Laudato Si, new prophetic political model, Fratelli Tutti. And you can see in Laudato Si, the Pope is proposing a refreshed anthropology. We are part of nature, an urgent need for radical change, with a culture of care and service. And in Fratelli Tutti, he's proposing, again, emphasizing the social dimension of the individual. The individual is okay, but that leads to individualism, and which is transformed politically in neoliberalism. The social, the popular dimension that we are people is okay, but hold on, popular doesn't mean populism. You see? So in between is this, but we are social beings, and if we manage to be a people and united peoples, we can allow individuals to flourish. Otherwise, that won't happen. So the universal social cohesion, for which we need a political economic challenge and a new culture of encounter, a universal order, the respect of human rights, the interreligious dialogue to do that. To wrap up, my last slide would be, the Pope talks a lot about dreams, but let me clarify that. In all the Querida Amazonia instructor on dreams, and in Fratelli Tutti, he comes again to dreams and dreams. And it might sound, again, in the Anglo-Saxon culture, I lived a lot in the UK, but I'm from Argentina, we might have a different perception of dreams. Normally, I don't know in Canada, but in England, when you say, oh, you're a dreamer, it's like, remember even the John Lennon's music, no? You may say, I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, no? A dreamer is a person who is there, is thinking in the utopical world. No, for Pope Francis, a dreamer is not like that. A dreamer is more an existential dreamer. It's a social dreamer. I dream with others. And I dream with others is a biblical dream, where you dream in something that is possible because God is there, and the Holy Spirit is there in the dream. As Saint Joseph, the husband of Mary, no? He dreamed, boom, he cared for her family. The dream, we can dream together as people, and we can do it. We can do it. So, as a single human family, as fellow travelers with the same flesh, we have all the same flesh. There's no division of colors, cultures, nations. Yes, of course we are divided, but we are all human beings, for goodness sake. So let's walk. We have serious problems. We cannot resolve these global, serious, universal problems isolated. We need to do it. We don't have any choice. We don't have any choice. This is not, it will be better. We cannot address a global issue individually. Individually, it could be as a nation. An example is the vaccine. Is it not totally irrational that some countries are thinking, no, let's first my people, but you're a fool. If your neighbor is infected, you will need another vaccine. It's either we vaccinated everybody or nobody. Can you see? Climate change, ecological destruction. No, I will care for my region, but but you're again a rational fool, as a Martyr would say, because if we don't care for the entire planet, sooner or later you will be in problems too. So global inequality. Well, I don't care because I'm a privileged person. Well, again, you're a fool, because sooner or later you will not be privileged, or if you continue being privileged, the gap will be so high, so big that you won't be able to enjoy your privilege any longer. So we are fellow travelers in the same flesh. We need to address these global common problems together, and we are children of the same earth, of our Mother Earth, that sustains us and governs us. That is, mother is a sister, as Saint Francis of Assisi used to say, and as Pope Francis, the Bishop of Rome, normally reminds us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. I'm sure that that everyone who has managed to be involved. Oh, there I see one clap already. Those of you who know how to do those things. So thank you very much, Father Augusto. You began by saying that it's been a very long day with you, for you already, with representatives of the United Nations and other meetings. But I think that this is a unique opportunity for us to talk to somebody who is close to Pope Francis and is so enthusiastic and knowledgeable for the direction that he is defined. So I would like to squeeze every last drop out of you before you fall over asleep. And if that means that we have to rearrange our schedule and have another meeting where we talk about the actual practical outcomes, let me just say that I hope that the most profound thanks that we can give you is that the people involved already, and those friends of ours whom we talk to and influence, that we all turn to action towards the goals of Laudato Si and adopting the social, political kind of perspectives of Fratelli Tutti to manage to get there. That would be proper thanks to the contribution that you've made to our thinking today. So thank you very much. And I would like people to either use the chat or use your hand up sign to indicate that you would like to, or putting your hands up too, although I have to go back and forth over the screen to see people. So if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please keep it short. We don't want Father Augusto to fall over asleep too quickly. So here we go. Oh, these were very nice thanks already coming to you. Mille grazie, Padre Zampini, somebody says. So I think they know how to talk to you. Okay, who wishes to ask a question? Either I know that there's two people here who share your status as a priest, and perhaps if Father Darrell or Father Tim has a particular question that they'd like the answer to come from Rome rather than trickle through the the chain of command. No, you're shaking your head. Well, I have a question for you, Father Augusto. From what you've seen or heard of around you in Rome, let's say, or elsewhere in the world, I wonder about some success stories, things that individuals have done or things that groups have done that you think are really striking about how they're putting Laudato Si into action. Do you have some favorite examples?
Sure, many examples, but just to say, for example, all the young people from all over the world, rich and poor alike, who have made this campaign from divestment from fossil fuels. And now we have dioceses, but start the parishes, dioceses, and other organizations, and even companies, entire companies, and even countries or cities divesting from fossil fuels and reinvesting in renewable energy or in other things that have positive social and environmental impact. That is a huge success. Had it been for these young people and many Catholics, no, And one of them, I mean, a group of them they are in the global Catholic climate movement, and they have Laudato Si animators. So these Laudato Si animators are animating their own communities, and that, for me, that has been a success. Another success are changes in some schools. For example, we have more than 200 schools in India. I think they belong to the Salesian families, the schools, but that the school, and thanks to the children, have managed to change the entire curriculum, change the entire school, the entire understanding of the school and the relationship with nature. So that's another success story. A closer to you, more academic-like, would be Georgetown University, that they are in a journey that is, of course, not in an overnight, because it's a long journey, of becoming a net zero university. Not just in the way they use, they consume it, but also a Laudato Si oriented one in the curricula, etc. And many examples from dioceses, from parishes, from England and Wales, from Scotland, from Argentina. One success story is, it's called Cuidadores de la Casa Común, so carers for our common home in Argentina. There are people who are who have lived their sentence in prison. They are going out of prison, of course, without jobs. But then they started to create new things. They create new things, and they create new energies, and so you can see the social and environmental thing together here. But I have millions of stories, so I will stop here because I can talk forever.
Thank you. Here's a question from one of our participants. It seems that the Catholic world has been slow to react to Laudato Si. Is Laudato Si also slow in reaching certain other continents, for example, the Arab world or Asia? What's your perception of how it's getting around? Oh, and I do have one question. When you mentioned the university that is going to net zero, can you repeat which university was that? I didn't catch the name.
Georgetown University.
Oh, Georgetown in Washington. Yeah. Okay. So back to the question here. How is Laudato Si spreading both within the Catholic world and more broadly?
Normally, the encyclicals, they don't have an immediate acceptance because they are radical messages that they have to be digested by people. No? As I said before, nobody will change even because the Pope tells me to change. So you have to digest it as a community. It's a change. That's one of the reasons it has been slow, because it's a deep change and it requires time. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but so this is the paradox. But Laudato Si has inspired many. Another reason that it has been slow is the resistance to, if I'm a privileged person and I have to change the way I live, the way my holidays, the way I travel, and you say, oh, give me a break. Okay, well, I'm a good person. I don't kill anybody. I don't steal. I love my family. So normally the resistance, I'm afraid to say, normally the resistance comes from privileged people, in either elites in poor countries, or I would say what we call the developed world, or North America, I mean the Northern Americas, Europe, in the Catholic world, I've said. In the South, is much accepted. In the Asia, it's very well accepted. I mean, even Asia, depending on what Asia is, a big country. In India, the Philippines, because they are so hit by these typhoons, that they are really, really on board on Laudato Si. And also the bishops of the Philippines were one of the first in mentioning this problem back in the 80s. And yes, but it's true that because you have to change, and some people even, some people are ideologically, they think that the climate change is a political thing. So if you're on one party or another, you believe and you believe. Climate change is not about beliefs. It's a fact. It's science, pure science. And let me be crystal clear, Bob, with this. Just there is no, some scientists think that, some scientists think that. there's no way of being neutral with that. It's 99% of the scientific world agrees that this is a problem, it's a human-made problem, and we have to change. And this is in the more than 30 years of research of representatives of all countries, no, that is called the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And there's an unanimous call from the scientific world. The 1-2% who don't agree, they work for industries that they don't want to change. Is it not a coincidence? They are somehow connected. So please don't accept this false dichotomy. There's a very, very strong, there's not even that consensus in the use of penicillin in medicine. So in terms of climate crisis, there's a very strong consensus of the scientific world. But how to respond is a political issue, it's an economic issue, and this is the resistance. And we are part of the political and economic world. That's why it's so important to link it with Fratelli Tutti, you see? Because otherwise we won't be able to look after the planet, even as a parish. Because yes, the parish has to change things if we want to change. When we organize a party, what things, yes, it's so easy to have plastic. I mean, well, let's organize it. Well, yes, we have to do it. We have to think differently. How even we organize a party. And it's a hassle, yes, but if you have the motivation, it's an inspiration, it's not a hassle. But if you are resistant, we all have resistance. So the spirituality is there to back us up in this journey of conversion.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if John Dorner wanted to intervene. Were you? Yeah. Go ahead, John.
No, I'm just, we'll be leading to the next section, and Father Augusto, that's so important, all the information that you shared, and I'll be leading the next section of today's session. And the one thing which I really is a takeaway for me is we need a new way of being church. And I think that that's what we're about too, is we need that new way, and we need to have the foundation and to spread it. But thank you so much.
Thank you, John. If I may respond to some of the comments that we should prepare the priests and seminaries. Of course, the Pope says that in the encyclical. The problem is that the bishops or rectors of the seminary are not included. The Pope says in the encyclical. Then, of course, the Pope cannot do everything. The Pope is the Pope and said that. But then it's up to us to follow, you see, to a new way of being church, as John said.
Right. What simple things can individuals do to live Laudato Si? You gave us some examples of schools and parishes and so forth, or the university. Are you? Are there friends of yours or relatives or anything or people that you know where the action is very much at the individual level that impresses you?
Two things, Bob, on that. And thank you, Marini. One is, in one of the paragraphs of Laudato Si, the Pope explains that these enormous problems, global problems, it could be overwhelming because this is the first reaction. What can I do? Now, the Pope clarifies and brings the spirituality of Saint Teresa of Lisieux. He says, every little gesture of love counts. Every little gesture of love counts because love is what changes the world. So Saint Teresa of Lisieux was a Carmelite nun in her convent. She wanted to change the world, she couldn't. But from her convent, she managed to promote a kind of new way of being church. So by every little gesture with her sisters, so every little gesture counts. Do not underestimate the power of little gestures of love and care. Yeah, and you have the example in your families. In my life, in my daily life, if I start with somebody who smiles at me, that makes entire difference. Somebody who shouts at me. No? So don't underestimate the power of tenderness and little gestures of love and care for creation. But also, he says, this is not enough because the problem is structural. So we need to change the structures while we promote new personal habits. And this is the tension. The structures and habits, they go hand in hand. And some will be able to contribute more with the structures, but we all can contribute from the personal things. I'll tell you a story, a very stupid story, but maybe you. So when I was working in CAFOD, in the development agency in London, I love motorbikes. You see, I'm mad of motorbikes. Totally irrational thing about motorbikes. So I started to go on my bike to work. Suddenly I discovered that in the car park, my bike was the only bike. There were so many bicycles. No, I also like cycling because everything is 2 wheels. I love it. So suddenly I discovered I was the theological advisor to promote Laudato Si, and all my colleagues were taking public transport or were going. The car park was almost empty. They were taking public transport or bicycles, except the theological advisor. So they helped me. You see, this is a tiny little thing because, as you know, bikes do not pollute a lot because that's why they have. But it made me think. They helped me in this tiny little thing, and ever since I started to commute on my bicycle, my push bike. Now here in Rome it's a bit more difficult. It's a bit dangerous, the bicycle. But at least in London, this is the link with the structures. You see, a city that is promoting more cycling is easier than a city who is not promoting cycling. For public transport, a city with good public transport can do a lot of good, even for elderly people. Whereas a city that you have to buy to drive a car, this is a tiny little example. Holidays is another example. I know a lot of people who have changed their holidays. You have to think in eco holidays that you can still travel, or to measure your carbon emissions, or there's even games to measure carbon. There's so many things that you can do at a personal and a household level. So many things. But please do not underestimate those little gestures. They do count, while other people push harder for the structural change.
Well, thank you very, very much, Father Augusto. I think ending on that very personal note, please, if you have to take public transit or your bicycle to get to your bedroom, I wish you.
I'm in the office now in the Vatican, and the doors close in 10 minutes, so I really must go. I have a pushback today, yes, because today I had the Laudato Si talk with you, so I have to use the bicycle.
Thank you very, very much, and I hope that one day we'll have the occasion to call on you again, and you'll again be as generous with your time and your views on our world. Thank you very much, Augusto, on behalf of all of us. Ciao.
So thank you very much, and I hope it was useful. And if not, don't believe me, but read the document of Pope Francis.
Okay. Bye-bye. And now I'm going to turn it over to John Dorner. I don't think that we should abandon our plan. We need to proceed with moving along to action groups. And John is now setting up his slideshow, which will give some background. But as you know, we asked at our last session for people's thoughts on areas that they would like to work on. And we'd also done a little survey at St. Basil's before this all started. And the overwhelming thing was that we wanted to get beyond theory and discussion and get down to activity. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, over to you, John, and let's see how far we get.